pretty excited about this panel. In the history courses that I teach at IPFW, we encounter a lot of revolutions, and revolutions are always fun, right? As we're seeing now, oftentimes people don't get along with their governments. Sometimes you wish they would just change. Sometimes legal channels for change are more challenging than others. So it's times like that when frustrations come to a head that we see groups come together and revolt and overthrow the powers that be or fail to. So what we're going to be seeing today is 3 different examples of times when populations sought the need to change the regime they were under. We're going to go in chronological order and start with ancient Rome with Caitlin Rushing, who's going to be talking about a slave revolt with Spartacus. Then we're going to move on to a revolution I'm partial to, the French Revolution, with Fyodor Wheeler, who's going to be talking about a particular aspect of change during that revolution. He's going to be looking at religion and challenges to the national religion in France and attempts to change that during the French Revolution. And then we're going to continue moving further into the future and further west to the Americas with Philia Anderson, who's going to be talking about the Haitian Revolution and its lasting impact on other revolutionaries in their Latin American revolutions. So without further ado, I give you Caitlin.
All right, hi, my name is Caitlin Rushing, and you already know what I'm doing up here, so. All right, so the Third Servile War, also known as the Spartacus War, was the only one of 3 slave wars to directly threaten the heart of Rome, due to its repeated victories over the Roman army and rapidly expanded numbers. The rebel slave responsible for the success of this uprising was Spartacus. Originally from Thrace, a region located today on the borders of Bulgaria, Greece, and Turkey, Spartacus was an auxiliary of the Imperial Roman army. An auxiliary's role was to provide additional help in the army. And at this point, Thrace and Rome were allies. However, betrayed by the Romans, Spartacus was captured and became a prisoner of war and was eventually trained as a gladiator in Capua. And Capua was an ancient Roman city, located in southern Italy. After becoming a gladiator, he eventually broke out and led one of the most famous and effective uprisings against Rome. Although the rebellion was ultimately put down, it remains a symbol of freedom and resistance in the modern-day world. The institution of slavery in Rome was fundamentally what shaped its culture and society. In the Roman Republic, slavery was a common practice that was not only accepted, but widely expected and practiced. The slaves themselves were subject to the dominion of his or her master. The Roman social order had a distinct social system. The social elites were at the top, including the patricians, senators, and equestrians. The typical Roman citizens were toward the middle, with the municipal magistrates, freeborn Roman citizens, and freed slave citizens. And at the bottom were the slaves, who were considered property. As property, slaves were at the complete mercy of their owners and lacked all the rights freeborn citizens had, such as the acknowledgement of their kinship, the integrity of their own physical bodies, and the right to own property. The mere ownership of slaves symbolized power and wealth because owners exercised complete control over their human property. The general treatment of slaves was strict and harsh. To the Roman citizens, slaves were replaceable and inferior. Gladiatorial slaves had a similar status as common slaves, but were forced to fight for the amusement of the Roman masses. In most cases, gladiators were auxiliaries of the Roman army or prisoners of war. Gladiator slaves were held in a different regard than regular slaves because they could gain the love of the people. When typical Roman house slaves were viewed as part of their pristine lifestyle, gladiatorial slaves were revered for their valor and successes in the arena. These gladiatorial games were thrown by aristocrats to gain political support in the people's favor. These games were utilized to keep the masses entertained and preoccupied from outside misfortunes they might have been facing in their own lives. Training to become a gladiator was violent and cruel and constructed under the harshest of conditions. Once an individual had proven himself worthy of gladiator status, he took an oath to be burned, chained, beaten, and killed with an iron weapon. Similar to all other slaves, gladiators too were subject to capital punishment if they defied their masters or committed a wrongdoing. During the years of the Roman Republic, slaveholders could condemn a slave to death by crucifixion, burning, or having him thrown into an arena to face wild animals. They could also purchase the service of torturers, having their gladiators burned, racked, or flogged. Spartacus himself was a Thracian gladiator who led the slave rebellion between the 1st century BCE. Although little is known about Spartacus's personal life leading up to his captivity in Rome, his leadership role in the rebellion is unquestionable. Spartacus ignited the initial spark of the rebellion and was the brains behind the entire military campaign. A simple gladiator who had been held in A simple gladiator who had been held in a gladiatorial school in Capua, Spartacus had no political or financial backing, nor did he have specially trained soldiers fighting in his league. He also did not have an arsenal of infinite weapons. Instead, he took and distributed the weapons gained from each victory. According to Appian, a Roman historian, there were 3 attributes of Spartacus's leadership that set him apart from a typical military leader. First, he divided equally the spoils of war won from raids. And second, he banned merchants from bringing in gold or silver. And from that, he also didn't allow anyone in his camp to possess any. Instead, Spartacus encouraged his followers to trade with iron and copper. With these raw materials, they were all equipped for frequent raiding explorations. This encouraged his people to utilize and trade with what they needed to survive instead of bartering for materialistic gain. The initial breakout of Capua, of the gladiatorial school, also known as the ludus, served as a jumpstart to the Great Slave Rebellion. In 73 BCE, Spartacus had a group of about 77 gladiators who broke out. It is uncertain to historians today what exact event inspired the sudden burst of violence, but it is suspected that the overall lack of loyalty between the master and slaves played a role. Nonetheless, it was with these 78 gladiators that the Third Servile War began. What sets this rebellion apart from the first 2 Servile Wars is that the slaves' uprising were gladiators. To give kind of a background, the first Servile War was led by Eunice, a Roman slave who claimed to be a prophet, and a man named Cleon, who later became Eunice's military commander. The war itself lasted about 3 years, and Cleon fell in battle while Eunice was captured, and he died before the Romans could punish him. This revolt became... Just kidding. This revolt failed because a larger Roman army arrived in Sicily and was able to put it down. The Second Servile War was from 104 to 100 BCE. Fueled by the same level of abuse in Sicily as the slaves in the First War, this revolt was prompted by miscommunication. The consul at the time had freed over 800 Italian slaves in order to supply his legions for an impending war. Frustrated by not getting released as well, many non-Italian slaves rose up and revolted. Led by a man named Tryphon, a slave who followed in the footsteps of Eunice, this slave army consisted of 2,000 cavalry and 20,000 infantry. Like the First War, the Roman army was able to put this rebellion down as well through its great numbers and war tactics. The past failures of the Servile Wars are what makes the Third Servile War more successful. For the first time, the 2 opposing sides were somewhat balanced in skill level and size. Where areas the Roman army was trained to maintain social order and put down rebellions such as these, the gladiatorial army was skilled in Roman combat as well as their own military training from their home countries. And from each success of the slave army, their numbers just kept exponentially increasing. The gladiators themselves were lethal and their sense of morality was strong. Freedom was their objective and they were willing to lay down their lives to obtain it. This, in addition to their vast numbers, after their repeated victories over the Roman legions, could be constituted as a reason for its success and notoriety in history, but it could also be credited for their inevitable demise. The varied ethnic and cultural backgrounds of the rebels' army made it incredibly unstable. The ethnic makeup of the gladiatorial army was composed of Gauls, Germans, Thracians, and others from surrounding areas that had been overtaken by the Romans. With these diverse backgrounds, language barriers, and previous allegiance toward one's own homeland impeded the rebel army's cohesiveness and efficiency. Initially organized like the Roman army as one unit, being that this was what they were used to in previous auxiliaries, internal dissension caused the army to divide into separate legions. Crixus, who was a Gaul renowned for his many successes in the arena, became one of the heads of the legions. He became the leader of the Gallic and German people, while Spartacus remained the leader of the rest of the rebels. Crixus and his followers sought to sack the city of Rome and avenge themselves for their great mistreatment at the hands of Rome. This faction had a more militaristic and vengeful outlook, while the followers of Spartacus continued to head north through the Alps to once and for all escape Roman territory. This separation between the legions of Spartacus and Crixus allowed the Roman army to divide and conquer, which ultimately led to their put down. There were several Roman military and political leaders that saw the slave uprising as a means to further advance their own political agendas and personal agendas. Amongst these individuals were praetors, and praetors had two official roles. One role was the commander of an army, and the other, which was technically an elected magistrate, carried out miscellaneous duties such as maintaining and overlooking the laws. After countless attempts by Roman praetors and magistrates, the Senate made the final decision of appointing Marcus Crassus, the richest man in Rome, to put the rebellion to rest. With extensive military experience and past successes, Crassus had the military competency as well as the financial means to see it through. Crassus's eventual success in defeating Spartacus derived from his warfare tactics. In Rome, there were two types of warfare, bellum and bush conflict. Until Crassus took over this campaign, the Romans viewed the slave uprising as a bush conflict, which basically means they viewed the enemy as unstructured and socially inferior. Instead, Crassus approached the matter as a bellum iustum, or just war, which recognized the enemy as genuine and saw conflict as between two legitimately established states. Therefore, Crassus felt the war should be fought according to recognized forms of combat. This recognition of legitimate organization Spartacus used for his army enabled Crassus to use military tactics that were finally successful in putting down the revolt. In the final battle Spartacus fought, he died not as a general of an army, but as a gladiator in the arena. At the battle by the river Salaris, Spartacus was killed by Roman soldiers before he could cut his way to Crassus. After his death, Crassus successfully hunted down the rest of the 6,000 fleeing slaves. Crucifixion had been a popular form of capital punishment and used throughout the rebellion, and it was Crassus's choice of punishment for the remaining slaves as well. In 70 BCE, Crassus ordered a row of wooden crosses to be set up on either sides of the Via Appia. This 132-mile-long route lined the path from Capua, where the rebellion had originally begun, to the very gates of Rome. The actions of Spartacus was viewed as a most heinous crime, and Crassus aimed to make the rebels suffer for it, in addition to making an example out of them. This path of crucified rebels served as a gruesome warning to everybody passing along it. The legacy of Spartacus greatly differs from what it was in the initial aftermath of the rebellion. In the 1st century BCE, Spartacus and the rebellion served as a means to advance the prestige of those already in power. Although uncommon, the slave rebellion was a nuisance at most and was viewed as something that had to be stopped so the Romans could carry on with their traditional and societal norms. Today, the story of Spartacus and freedom still resonates deep throughout time and culture. In representing the one thing he was denied during his time as a Roman captive, Spartacus commanded the attention of the most powerful and decorated figures of Rome and ignited such passion and loyalty in his people that his actions reverberate long after his death. The legacy of Spartacus proves that one man can reverse the traditional role of slave, whether it was defying his master, challenging the accepted norms of the state, or completely eradicating the status of slaves themselves. The Romans sought to exert their complete control over their slaves. If only briefly, Spartacus and his slave rebellion showed that this control could be shaken and the opposed can and will fight back. Thank you.
You see
PowerPoint on them?
Well, my name is Fyodor, and as Dr. Bauer said, we're moving a little forward in time to the French Revolution. And before I begin, I'd like to call your attention to the picture behind me on the screens. It's a depiction of the Festival of Reason, which was held in Notre Dame in Paris on November 10th, 1793, which was during the French Revolution. This was supposed to be the inauguration of an atheistic religion called the Cult of Reason. And this shocked and scandalized France, and it's gone down in history as the least laudable of the festivals held in the Revolution. Likewise, the cult it celebrated has been remembered as bizarre and even shameful. And at first viewing, the cult was the incarnation of Jacobite hatred of the traditional authority of the king and church, and the realization of Enlightenment ideals of reason and nature over superstition and mysticism. However, it was far more complex than this, and to be understood, it must be viewed as part of the wider scope of French history and religion. By this time, France already had a complicated relationship with religion, as it was a Catholic kingdom that had changed its policy on its Protestant minority several times by the beginning of the Revolution. The Edict of Nantes had first granted limited religious freedom to Protestants in 1598 in a decree from King Henry IV, who was himself a Huguenot French Protestant convert to Catholicism. In 1685, however, this was revoked by his grandson, Louis XIV, with the Edict of Fontainebleau. The Sun King made it known that we forbid our subjects of the Reformed Protestant religion to meet any more for the exercise of the said religion in any place or private house under any pretext whatever. This decree resulted in many Protestants fleeing France and settling in England and the Netherlands. The rationalization for France's decree was Luke 14:23. Compel them to come in that my house may be full. Rather than subjecting the minorities to intolerance, the king was fulfilling the command of Christ made in a parable to welcome more into true Christianity. This required force, including conversion to Catholicism through dragonnades, a policy of using dragoons to intimidate Protestant families. The forced conversions and the rationalizations did not convince Pierre Bayle, a Huguenot who had immigrated to the Netherlands and lost his father, mother, and brother as a direct or indirect result of the dragonnades. In 1686, he wrote a rebuttal entitled A Philosophical Commentary on these words of Jesus Christ, Compel them to come in. Bayle's commentary would prove to be the first great defense of toleration and a catalyst of the Enlightenment. In it, he refuted the interpretation of Luke 14:23 as divine license to impose one form of Christianity over an entire people. He attacked the true cause of Europe's troubles, intolerance, saying non-toleration is the sole cause of all the disorders which are falsely imputed to tolerance. To Bayle, toleration was the very bond of peace, and intolerance the source of confusion and squabble. Intolerance was repugnant to reason and justice, and those who enacted laws to tell others what to believe were exceeding their power and overstraining their authority. Bayle's indictment of intolerance would motivate other thinkers to question this overstrained authority. However, the authority in question, it saw itself perfectly within its rights to control people's religious affairs. France was a Catholic nation, but this Catholicism was of a school that was uniquely French. Called Gallicanism, it viewed the king as the representative of God in France, and the king only had to submit to the Pope in Rome over matters of faith and morality. In all matters of the French state, the French clergy was beholden to the king rather than the papacy. The Gallican Church obviously did not please the Pope, and it divided the French clergy with those who supported the traditional power of the papacy called the Ultramontanes, so called for their devotion to the power over the mountains. According to the Declaration of the Clergy of France of 1678, the Pope had jurisdiction in spiritual concerns and no right to overthrow princes. Ecumenical councils were more authoritative than the Pope. The liberties of the French Church were inviolable, and the Pope was infallible only when he agreed with the Council of Bishops. Convenient. Pope Innocent XI declared these articles null and void, and would not accept bishops who approved them, leaving many dioceses without canonical bishops. Facing this shortage, King Louis allowed bishops to forego the articles in 1693, and the new pope, Innocent XII, recognized the royal right of the episcopal nominations. This compromise is important for two reasons. First, King Louis XIV was able to keep his reputation as the most Christian king, and the Vatican remained in support of France, which remained a Catholic country rather than founding its own church. Second, the French government was allowed to have at least partial jurisdiction in religious matters, which paved the way for complete governmental control of the clergy in 1790. While Louis XVI and Rome were both at least satisfied by the compromise, the dispossessed religious minorities and the growing population of intellectuals were not. The Enlightenment's investigations into nature and philosophy suggested that the world followed rules rather than mystery, and that governments were supported only by their people. Some of the great writers of their age questioned the nature of God as Christianity understood it. These were the philosophes, many of whom advocated some level of de-Christianization. Of these, Voltaire and Rousseau represented a soft form of de-Christianization. They opposed traditional Christianity and all other revealed religions as what they saw as perversions of a natural religion. Voltaire once exclaimed, on seeing a magnificent sunrise with a friend, I believe in you, powerful God, I believe." To his friend, he added, "As for Monsieur, the sun, and Madame, his mother, that's a different story." He believed in God, but not the divinity of Christ or anything beyond the existence and adoration of what he called the Supreme Being. At the same time, he called for toleration, saying Christians should tolerate each other. I shall go further and say that we should regard all men as our brethren. Yes, without a doubt, for are we not all children of the same Father and creatures of the same God? In his social contract, Rousseau was more blunt. He posited a relatively stable pre-Christian past and claimed that it was in these circumstances that Jesus came to set up on earth a spiritual kingdom, which, by separating the theological from the political system, made the state no longer one and brought about the internal divisions which have never ceased to trouble Christian peoples. His solution to this was a civil religion with the existence of a mighty, intelligent, and beneficent divinity possessed of foresight and providence, the life to come, the happiness of the just, the punishment of the wicked, the sanctity of the social contract and the laws as its positive dogmas. Voltaire and Rousseau both promoted a civic religion of humanity which would replace traditional Christianity and return to the true form of worship of the Supreme Being. However, not all the philosophes espoused such a desire to reform religion along natural lines. Instead, they promoted atheism and did more than blame religion, and Christianity in particular, for causing society's problems. They called for religion to be completely dismantled and replaced with reason. Religion was superstition at best and a threat to humanity at worst in their minds. Paul-Henri Thiers, the Baron de Holbach, echoed Rousseau's negative view of Christianity in his polemical Christianity Unveiled, saying that it, for 18 centuries, caused more ravages and greater effusions of blood than all the superstitions of heathenism. His response to these ravages was reason. Reason will break their chains. Reason, which was created to reign with undivided empire over all intelligent beings. Reason would become the standard of what historian Will Durant characterized as a war between Christianity and philosophy that would culminate in the fall of the Bastille and the feast of the goddess of reason. The revolution's struggle with Christianity began soon after the fall of the Bastille with the civil constitution of the clergy. Passed on July 12, 1790, the civil constitution placed the ecclesiastical affairs of France under the control of the government. The number of dioceses was limited to 10, and all members of the clergy were to be government employees with their salaries paid by the government. All monastic orders were abolished, and like all government employees, the clergy was to be elected by the voting population. Catholic or not, and that no church or parish of France, nor any French citizen may acknowledge the authority of an ordinary bishop or of an archbishop whose see shall be under the supremacy of a foreign power, nor that of his representatives residing in France or elsewhere. However, unity with the faith and the earthly head of the church was to be maintained. The civil constitution of the clergy was more than reminiscent of the earlier theories of Gallicanism. It was the same statement of the superiority of French religious identity and control. This 18th century Gallicanism combined the traditional separatism of the French church with the Enlightenment ideals of civic duty and reason. It was unpopular with the clergy, which largely rejected it, and disliked by the ineffectual King Louis XVI, but it became law. There would be no compromise between the government and church as there had been in 1693. Instead, it would keep the clergy under the control of the government that grew more anti-Catholic as the Revolution progressed. The Feast of the Goddess of Reason, as Will Durant so named it, was the highly theatrical climax of the cult of reason, a replacement for Christianity begun by Jacques Hebet and other radicals. Like Christianity, says Christopher Dawson, it was a religion of human salvation, the salvation of the world by the power of man set free by reason. The cross had been replaced by the tree of liberty, the grace of God by the reason of man, and redemption by revolution. In a way, it was an extension of Rousseau's natural religion. Historians have commonly considered this religion atheistic, as there was no central figure other than the virtue of reason. However, it has also been interpreted to be as deistic rather than wholly atheistic. Nor did the cult worship reason. According to Charles Little, the term denotes not the adoration of reason, but the religion of reason. That is, a rational form of worship in contrast to the modes of worship. My apologies. To the rational form of worship in contrast to the modes of worship enjoined by the religions of Revelation. The Festival of Reason can be taken as representative of the ideas of the cult of reason itself and its religious heritage. It had a natural axis mundi, an artificial mountain constructed in front of the cathedral's main altar. I don't think you can see it in the picture in this part of in this image. Constructed in front of the cathedral's main altar, complete with rocks, trees, and grass. Placed at different points on this mountain were effigies of men of the Enlightenment: Voltaire, Rousseau, Franklin, and perhaps Montesquieu. Halfway up the mountain was a small classic altar with a torch burning to symbolize truth. At the top of this fake mountain was a peristyle inscribed with the words, "À la philosophie." A procession of maidens dressed in tricolor sashes and carrying torches called flambeaux wound up the mountainside, paying homage to the effigies and the torch of truth. In the peristyle at the top of the mountain there appeared a matron dressed in a blue mantle, wearing a liberty cap and carrying a spear. She took her place on the throne and received homage from the maids. The cult of reason honored the Enlightenment figures shown in effigy as their own secular saints, and the ideals of reason and truth as what would guide humanity towards the real, natural state of man in his worship. The symbolism in the festival itself were to replace the comfort and community that had been taken from the French people as Christianity was suppressed. Hopefully, it would encourage a civic-minded group of adherents, but it failed. The French people on the whole did not appreciate the attempts of a few Jacobites to remove Christianity and belief in an obvious God. The festival scandalized France, and the deists in charge of the government, including Robespierre, disapproved of this seemingly atheistic religion. They sought to replace it with their own, much more explicitly deistic faith, the cult of the Supreme Being, hearkening back to Voltaire. The cult of reason never achieved official status, and it closed up soon after that November. It would be replaced by the equally short-lived cult of the Supreme Being. What, then, is to be made of this interlude of the failed natural religion and reason during the French Revolution? While it appears to have come from the revolutionary hatred of religion, it was in fact simply another faith. Dechristianization was in part a response to the intolerance pervasive in French society and religion. Louis XVI's Edict of Toleration, issued in 1787, was too little too late. By the time of the Revolution, the deistic and anti-Christian views of the philosophes had taken hold among France's intellectuals who led the revolution, and there could be no compromise. It was further made possible by the earlier established theory of Gallicanism, which placed religious control in the hands of the government, leading to the civil constitution of the clergy, which intended to secularize the church. It ultimately failed because the majority of the French people still believed in God, despite the cult's attempt to overthrow him. Thank you. Good job. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Felia Anderson. And despite me being a communications major, it's in interpersonal and organizational communication. So my speaking, it may be a little shaky, but I'm here to inform you about the Haitian Revolution and the impact that it had on the Americas, using the cases of Simone Bolivar and Frederick Douglass. Whatever may be said against the Haitians, it should be remembered that these people nearly a century ago instituted a movement which, ending in Brazil in 1860, resulted in the driving the institution of slavery from the Western Hemisphere. It's Robert T. Hill in 1888. My essay addresses the impact the Haitian Revolution had on the Americas' fight for abolition and freedom using the cases of Simone Bolivar and Frederick Douglass. Each of these men were in search of autonomy for their people. Although Bolivar and Douglass had differing opinions over the years as revolutionaries, Haiti, in distinct ways, influenced both of their movements for abolition and freedom. To begin, we must briefly discuss the Haitian Revolution. At the time of the Revolution, 1791, slaves outnumbered free people 10-1. This led to a slave revolt in a 13-year-long battle. At times where slaves were fighting not only the French, but the English and the Spanish for control over the lucrative colony. January 1st of 1804, Haiti was freed from French rule. Around the world, many heard of the triumph, and depending on which side of abolition a person was on, they were either overjoyed or scared. The revolution was one of a kind in the Western Hemisphere. Being second in the U.S. to claim independence, Haiti was the first nation to end slavery in their nation. This act had tremendous and long-lasting consequences. Before the revolution, Haiti was the largest sugar producer and the richest colony. After, it quickly became the poorest and most isolated country. Despite Haiti lacking in global backing, the nation was able to aid South American revolutions through the Venezuelan revolutionary Simone Bolivar. Bolivar is known as El Liberator due to his great influence on the independence of Venezuela, Bolivia, Colombia, Panama, Ecuador, and Peru. Bolivar was born in a prominent family, but was orphaned at a young age. As a teen, he traveled to Europe, where he was exposed to those who opposed Spanish rule in the New World. He promised then to liberate his homeland. Most are aware of the role that he had in these countries, but are widely unaware of the influential aid given to him by the army, or given to him and his army by the Haitian president, Pétion. Bolivar himself would later ask, "Should I not let it be known to later generations that Alexandre Pétion is the true liberator of my country?" To begin, we start in December of 1815. Simone Bolivar landed on the island of Haiti. Bolivar was exiled from his home country of Venezuela and used Haiti as a safe haven until his return. There, he was given food, shelter, and aid from the president. Pétion was not in a position for his countrymen's sake to aid others, but he did. He did not only aid Bolivar with shelter and food upon his arrival, Pétion also gave Bolivar arms, ships, and soldiers. In exchange, Bolivar was held to a promise to end slavery in the nations that he emancipated from Spanish rule. In February of 1816, Bolivar writes the Haitian president asking him if he can name him as the liberator of his country. Pétion did not want to make an enemy of Spain and declined Bolivar, and only asked to ensure that slavery was abolished in those nations. Unfortunately, the first fleet was defeated after 6 months. Bolivar and his remaining army returned to Haiti. In 1816, in need of more aid and relief, President Pétion gladly took in Bolivar once again. Also, it is pertinent to mention that the Republic of Haiti at the time was in constant fear of attack from the French and ran the risk of reprisal from the Spaniards who were in possession of part of the island, as we know now as the modern-day Dominican Republic. The country nor the president were in a conducive position to aid refugees, and certainly not revolutionaries, especially those who were enemies of the Spanish. But Haiti, being a free nation, a nation freed by slaves, was sensitive to helping those who were seeking the same position. In a year from his landing in Haiti, Bolivar was once again given arms, men, and food, and sailed off one last time. The correspondence from the two men not only show friendship, but a respect for each other's cause. Bolivar was not expected to give any monetary payback to Haiti. The only expectation was to free the slaves in the nations that he would claim independence for. Pétion did not want any credit by name because of the repercussions that could have occurred. He wanted for the slaves in South America to be free as they were in Haiti. The aid that Haiti in both expeditions the aid that Haiti gave in both expeditions was needed. Bolivar searched for help from other nations, but was met with opposition. It wasn't until he arrived in Haiti that he was able to find help, and it made it possible for him to accomplish his goal. I ask now, if Haiti were not a free nation, if Haiti was not a free nation and was still ruled by the French, would Bolivar have succeeded? After a 13-year-long revolution and over a decade of independence, Haiti's spirit for freedom was not lost. Pétion knew of the backlash that could have ensued from aiding Bolivar, but still helped each time to push the ideals of freedom. With Haiti being a free country, this allowed Bolivar a safe place to regroup and claim more ships, men, and arms. Without the free nation's help and a promise made, Bolivar may not have advocated for abolition and freedom for black slaves in the 6 South American countries he claimed independence for. We move on to how the Haitian Revolution affected America. It took 6 decades after Haiti claimed independence from the French for the United States to recognize her as a free nation and to abolish slavery in their own country. Within those 60 years, free blacks and black slaves in America would hear of Haiti's triumph and would look towards her as a beacon of hope. It is important to mention that at the time of her independence, Haiti was stifled by 2, but also many more, it's a very complicated situation, but 2 factors. 1, in 1815, the French implemented tremendous compensations on Haiti for the loss of their slave nation and war expenses. This debt had crippling effects on Haiti's economy and wasn't completely paid until 1947. The international boycott, and second, there was an international boycott of the new nation. As mentioned before, the United States didn't recognize Haiti, but also that included Spain, England, France, obviously, and many other nations. They feared it would cause a slave uprising in their own nations. Within this boycott, the nations refused Haiti's goods and commerce. So essentially, they were isolated from globalization for many years. This also had lasting crippling effects on Haiti's economy, which trickled down into many aspects and stifled her growth. These 2 factors are mentioned to recognize that Haiti's troubles during the time were almost irreparable, but also speaks to the power Haiti had on the figurative thought for blacks. With the crippling economy, the nation fell backwards, leaving the black Americans to strive for the freedom that the Haitian people possessed, but not the heartache the people faced. Because Haiti was in such turmoil, many anti-abolitionists used it as an example to continue slavery, and many abolitionists shied away from Haiti for the same reason. Frederick Douglass was a very influential black abolitionist. Born a slave, Douglass was eventually able to buy his freedom. After, he became a champion for abolition, freedom, and equality for all. For Douglass and other blacks in America, freedom is what they were seeking, and Haiti was that. Though Haiti was constrained with many internal and external problems, one aspect remained, and that was that the Haitian people were free. Blacks in America yearned for the freedom of the Haitian people. So they even would hang pictures of the Haitian revolutionary Toussaint Louverture in their home. In 1816, Douglass writes a piece entitled A Trip to Haiti. There, he comprises a compelling argument for enslaved and free blacks to take a trip to Haiti. He speaks that being black there is not a disparaging quality, and that going there should be a desire for all blacks to see a nation ran by people of their own race, and to live there, you would not be condemned for your race. This piece is soon followed by a retraction due to the inaugural speech by President Lincoln declaring slavery should be abolished. Douglass writes for all blacks to stay in America and fight in the Civil War. Fight for the country they and their ancestors worked so hard to build. Haiti was not the home of these black Americans, and Douglass was aware of that. So it was not unusual for him to retract his trip, nor does it take away from the ideals he sought in his piece. Though a complicated tale to be woven, Haiti for Douglass was used to drive the message of freedom and abolition. It would take Douglass 30 years to mention Haiti again in a speech. In 1893, the commemorating ceremony of the 89th anniversary of the Haitian independence, Douglass pays homage to the Haitian people. He says, "We should not forget that the freedom you and I enjoy today, the freedom that the 800,000 colored people of the British West Indies, the freedom that has come to the colored world over, is largely due to the brave stand that was taken by the black sons of the Haitian people 90 years ago. When they struck freedom for every black man in the world." Although he does not mention Haiti until 30 years later, his speech is telling of his thoughts about Haiti, possibly throughout his life. But it definitely shows the impact it had on America and the world for abolition and freedom. Despite Haiti's modern, visible history of being the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere, Haiti created waves throughout the Americas and the world for the fight for abolition and freedom. I leave you with this last remark from the Haitian revolutionary Toussaint Louverture after his capture by the French 2 years prior to the Haitian independence. "In overthrowing me, only the trunk of the tree of the Negro liberty has been cut down. Its branches will shoot up, for it is numerous and deep."
Cool. We had 3 very thoughtful and provocative papers on different aspects of revolution. So we've got some time for questions from our wonderful audience. So anybody want to start us off? James?
Hey, I got one directed for Ms. Rushing and then for the entire panel. Post Spartacus Revolution or Spartacus Civil War, he moved to the heel of Italy as opposed to actually fleeing. Why? And then generally, for the entire panel, we see a dominant thing, and we saw with the previous panel as well. There's you see the constant trends on centralized powers trying to push something. So I remember for a fact one of you mentioned globalization. Is it even possible when we keep seeing these trends of centralized powers trying to interconnect everyone and then all these atrocities occur?
Okay. When you said he moves to the boot, are you, who are you referencing? Spartacus, Pompey,
Yes,
Crassus?
Spartacus moved his revolt, I think, after Crixus broke off to the boot of the hill, or to the boot of Italy, and then he was cut off. They built a wall. Do you remember that? If anyone can elaborate.
I mean, I know that he was heading north towards the Alps, but as far as moving towards the boot, I didn't come across that. So.
As far as, I'm pretty sure you're talking about me mentioning globalization. During during the mid-19th century, globalization was kind of booming in a way. So unfortunately for Haiti, it wasn't until 1860 that the United States itself was able to even recognize her as a nation. So without having recognition as a nation, trading and being able to be a part of the global community was not possible. Bolivar himself actually created a Panama Conference, I believe, and he didn't even invite Haiti to it because it wasn't recognized as a nation. So somebody or a country that helped him so much, he still wasn't even able to recognize himself due to the global community not recognizing them. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
That's an interesting question. With the French Revolution and religion, as I said, it came from the earlier ideas of a much more unique French church that was not beholden to the foreign power. The word ultramontane means literally over the mountains. And that refers to how the Vatican was across the separated from France by the Alps. And the connection that France didn't want to have with the church having power over them was reflected with the government not wanting to have even its own, in the revolution, with the government not wanting its own church to have power. So I think that it was, trying to think how to phrase that, it was that identity on a smaller scale. Does that answer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I actually want to connect these three really excellent papers to something in the first panel. The idea of memory is something that struck me as you all were talking about the impact these revolutions have had. Did you guys find in your research, or just sort of in generally kind of thinking about the topics of your papers, are these revolutions still remembered today? Do they still play a role in how people think about a place like Haiti or a place like France or of empires? Do we still see the impact of these revolutions in the thought of various people today?
I would say for Haiti, I mean, I think we could all probably close our eyes and think of what we think about Haiti, and most of us wouldn't think that it had any impact on the world. So as far as memory and as far as, I think this is the kind of information that is kind of left out of history, vastly left out of history. It wasn't until I took the class that I even found out about it. So I think that it kind of is a lost memory in ways. I know that the Haitian people obviously celebrate their independence, but I think globally it might be pertinent for people to recognize their independence, seeing that it had such an impact on the world. Because of Haiti, the slave trade was abolished for many countries, just a few years after her independence. So that's a huge impact on the world, on everyone. But I feel like it's kind of left out of history.
Well, the French Revolution is obviously one of the most famous revolutions in history. It also we also remembered that rather quickly it lost control, and a little bit. Of course, there was a whole period where everything just went insane, and quickly fell into the terror, in which it ended up that the government devoured its own. And this part of the revolution, with the cult of reason and the later cult of the supreme being, is largely forgotten, which is why I wanted to write this paper. It was such an unusual topic that I actually didn't know until I took Dr. Bauer's 114 class. As I pointed out in the beginning, that when it is remembered, it's remembered as something that's plain, this piece of the revolution is remembered as something that's just plain weird and kind of shameful. to look back at a society that tried to completely remove one of the main structures of its culture, and to replace it with something that in many ways was seen as a profanation of tradition, especially since it was in Notre Dame Cathedral. So that's an interesting question about how it's remembered. In this case, it's something that's not remembered within something that is very well remembered, that it's in everybody's mind. When you say revolution, that's one of the primary revolutions people are going to think of. So,
yeah. I'm really glad you asked that question. Yeah, like Spartacus, it's really remembered like throughout time. Like, I know it's more than just a risque TV show that I'm sure a lot of you have seen.
That show was terrible.
Yeah. Hey, you know, keeps your attention, I guess. But like I said, like it was remembered like during that time as just another revolution or like another slave uprising. And what made it different was the fact that they were gladiators. And then throughout time, like the memory of it has changed. It gone from like, oh, just another slave uprising to this slave represents freedom. He represents fighting for the oppressed, and just over time he just represents something much deeper than what he initially did. And I feel like that's his memory, and that's what really, you know, keeps him on everybody's mind. And you know, there's so many shows and so many writings about him. So
one of the sorry, Katie. One of the interesting things, one of the things I didn't mention about the French Revolution is there was the symbol of the Phrygian cap, this red kind of floppy. I don't know how to describe it, hat. I don't know if there's reason wearing one in that picture.
Probably.
Yeah.
Usually, I mean, the maiden that you mentioned is at the top of the mountain.
Yes. Well, that was, I don't know if you read about the Phrygian cap. That was a sign of freedom for slaves. When slaves received their manumission, they were given that cap.
really,
So that we've said about the changing view of the slaves in the revolt becoming a sign of freedom. So that that memory influenced my memory.
yeah.
So.
See, we're all remembering up
I'm
here.
sorry,
It's great.
I got really excited about that.
No, it's okay.
A common thread that I see between the three papers is this idea of religion as power and religion as, and the clergy taking usually the side of the government regardless of how inhumane the treatment that government is giving to its people. My question is, like, what was the role of the church or whatever religious institution those three countries or places had at that time, and how did the revolution impacted the lives of those people who are today in those places? Like, what happened in France? What is it? What do French people think about that religious institution at that time? What about in Haiti? What was the role of at that time, I guess, Catholic religion, and what happened to the institution after the revolution?
I can say for Haiti, I think this is probably a widely known thing, is that the African slaves their religion was taken from them, and they were given Christianity in whatever form. But part of the slave uprising is that they kept their voodoo religion. And that was something that was able to bring together different tribes almost from different places, because the ships came from different areas in Africa, but it was their voodoo religion that kind of bounded them together. So in Haiti today, they still practice voodooism. So it's still largely practiced there.
Right, and the Haitian Revolution kicks off, the myth of the beginning of the Haitian Revolution is this giant voodoo ceremony by one of the
that's like one of the,
So France's relationship with religion, as I said, is very imbalanced, you might say. That it kept changing. And it could, by American standards, it would be a very secularized society, as most of Europe is. France remains with a large Catholic population, and however, their they don't show their religious beliefs as much as we do in America. It is actually illegal in all school systems in France to have any indica, any garment or even like a necklace of relating to any religion. Not just Christianity. It's illegal to do that in school. It's not illegal like on the street to do it, but in school you can't do that. And all public courts and so on. So I think that might be a little memory of the constant intolerance of the government towards particular religions and denominations, and kind of the memory of how I'm not sure if there's anything I could expand on that. There's
just a very strict separation.
Yeah,
of church and state.
The separation. That's it. That's the separation that this time that the church in some cases looked like it ran the state, and then the state trying to take over the church, and so it's them trying to kind of distance themselves from that memory, and the danger to society that can pose in some cases. So.
Yeah, in regards to ancient Rome, like I do know that they were polytheistic, and what my main focus on in my paper were the societal norms, what drove their culture. And well, I now regret not looking that much into religion and how it really affected that. And I would say the main driving force between their motives were just trying to get their freedom back. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for 3 great papers. And something that I was thinking about while all 3 of you were presenting, and Falia, you kind of mentioned something about rituals and voodoo bringing people together. It helped me articulate my thought, and it's this. If you're ever going to have a revolution, you need to have a critical mass of people who are all on the same page, who decide to put their necks on the line to have some sort of revolution, whether it be an intellectual one, slave revolt, or an actual political revolution. So at 3 different time periods, in 3 different areas of the world, I'm curious, in your research, and this might be asking more than you guys were able to come across, but in your research, were you able to find how these groups communicated with each other? Like, it sounds like Spartacus's army was some, like, UN of military fighting forces all over the place, from all parts of the world. And, you know, of course, when you have the French Revolution, you have all these writers. So I imagine the written word is important, but so is rituals like we see up there. And of course, with Haiti, you have the initial revolution, and then you have this network of people coming together across international borders, North America, South America, and the Caribbean, all communicating on this, you know, regional hemispheric, you know, war against slavery, it seems, in the 19th century. So, in short, how did people communicate? Was it simply oral? Was it written through ritual? If you guys can say something about that, I'd be fascinated to hear more about that.
Being a communications major, I probably should have looked into communication more, But from the little bit that I can remember, and I do remember researching on, I know that when the ships would come in, a lot of the slaves, well, the Haitian Revolution is very complex, so it becomes more than just like there was 10-to-1 slaves and they uprised, but from what I know is that when ships would come in from France, the Frenchmen would talk to the slaves that were taking the goods, and that's how they communicated what was going on in France, which was their, you know, their home country, I guess, in a way, and they would kind of delegate whatever the information was down to the slaves, and that's how it became kind of spread out throughout Haiti that way. At least that's how information came from France to Haiti, and then I can assume that that's how it led out of the world as well, is through the ships that came in and out.
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth, yeah, just on oral. I know that one of the gifts, I guess, that President Pétion gave Bolivar was a printing press. So for him, he was able to give him that, and then that was able to spread the news of his revolution in South America. So.
With the Cult of Reason, as I said, came out of part of the Enlightenment of primarily the philosophers, and the Enlightenment is often called a republic of letters because so much of it was written and was often through written communication between thinkers. And so there was this written communication between intellectuals and the upper classes who had access to that education. However, around the beginning of the French Revolution, there was a very high illiteracy rate in France, especially primarily in the rural areas, and that went up with the revolution and all. But so the way that people in other parts of the country would have learned about what was going on in Paris with the cult and all, the only one that I described was the one in Paris on November 10th. There were many festivals for the revolution in general, and this was just one of those festivals, which is why I think it's probably kind of buried historically. And there were other festivals of the Cult of Reason. Not all of them were named for reason, not all of them had the same level of pageantry, but these were all connected in kind of a similar theme, and they all occurred, I think, on the same day. Many of them occurred on the same day throughout the country. So it was that pageantry and experience of a ritual that people in other parts of the country would have seen the same ideas that came from the intellectuals over in Paris. So.
Yeah, and then with Spartacus, it was just a lot of, word of the mouth. They are basically like the UN of, ancient Rome. There were Thracians, Germans, Gauls, like people from everywhere. So obviously there were a lot of, different languages accumulated in one. And because they were one cohesive group for a long time, like, they would interpret for each other, and then, like, you can speculate that they began learning each other's languages maybe. But then as soon as the factions broke off between Spartacus and Crixus, I assume it's through, messengers like they did in the olden days. You can't shoot them a text because it just doesn't work like that. But yeah, so basically just through interpreters and understanding. So.
And they were all, Spartacus and his men were all military people, right? So they had that common experience
Auxiliaries of war, yep.
Drill.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Bjorn, can you say whether or did you find that these actions in France during the French Revolution, especially involving the church, did it substantially influence the United States, especially as they were writing their Constitution and doing including the Establishment Clause and their, strong feeling that church and state should be separate?
I haven't done much research into the American Revolution as connected to the French Revolution, to the writing of the Constitution, the Constitutional Convention in the French Revolution. But the Constitution was written in 1787, around the beginning of the Revolution. So, and that was largely set off by an ineffectual government that we had in the Articles of Confederation, and a revolt, actually, in rural Eastern America, Shays' Rebellion, of these farmers who were basically, we don't really know much about, we don't know anything about Daniel Shay, the leader. And that was one of the things that showed the government, okay, we need to reorganize this. I think that our Establishment Clause, Congress shall make no law respecting or prohibiting establishment of any establishment of religion or preventing the free practice thereof. I think that comes more from our own religious history of the many religious groups who made up America, especially with the early Puritans and the later conflicts between the later societal conflicts between Protestants and Catholics that we had, of course, not to the scale that they were in France, obviously. but just our own experiences with religion and the need to keep things separate, because that for the benefit of both the state and the church, to not interfere with each other. So I think that's more of our own experience. So that's just my thought.
Do you think that the hierarchy and magistrate did not want to adhere to the moral standard of the church, and that could have been a possible reason for the revolt?
That's really interesting, because they were more interested in not the authority of this traditional authority that they saw as oppressive, that had been connected to the connected so closely to the monarchy, which was being overthrown. I'm not so sure if it was not wanting to be under the moral, is what you said, that part authority. Of course, people will argue that you can be moral without God, which is true. I don't see this mostly as so much as a moral thing. I see this more as just a philosophical thing of how the world is ordered, and what place man has in the world, rather than does the world follow structured rules, or is it arbitrarily controlled by some supreme being? I don't think it's so much a moral as more of just a dislike of the general authority. Does that answer? Okay. Sorry.
You're good.
Thank you.
My question is for Ms. Anderson. Did Simone Bolivar and the Haitian Revolution in general, do you know if they had any effect later on with the later revolutions in the 20th century in South America? Like any of the memories had any influence?
What revolutions are you?
The revolution in Cuba and the various movements that Che Guevara was involved with.
I can assume. I haven't done any research, but my assumption is that everything is a butterfly effect. And when one country revolts and has a revolution and becomes independent, it kind of becomes a standard of living. And rather than maybe saying it directly affected them, maybe it was somewhat indirect. I can't say for certain that it had any effect on the independence, on countries that became independent in the 20th century. I only know that Simone Bolivar had direct impact on those six nations getting their independence, and Haiti obviously helping him. So I'm sorry. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just want to say that I thought that you had a very, I'm speaking to Ms. Anderson, you had a very profound thing to say, that at some point we should all visit Haiti. Because we think we as African Americans, we think of Africa as the motherland and the place we should all go. We should at one point in our life go to Africa. But I thought it was very profound to say that it is, Haiti is a place that you should go to, because that's really where the abolition and the freedom started. And it just sort of sent a little bell in my head that that's a very profound thing to say.
Yeah, I mean, the words were from Frederick Douglass. I would say that, I think that as African Americans, that is a thought for most of us, is to go to Africa. But for most African Americans, it's an arbitrary thought too, because we don't know where in Africa we originated in a way. So I once read something that kind of rang a bell with me, in that all blacks throughout the world are interconnected only through where the ship landed. So we're all interconnected. We're only different because of where the ship landed. We can have ancestry anywhere, in any part of the world. So I think it was pretty profound when him saying that we should take a trip to Africa. But I think what was even more profound is that he told us to stay and to fight for the country that we built. So.
And it's interesting, Haiti is still today the one and only successful slave rebellion. No offense, Spartacus.
We tried.
Yeah.
We started it.
Yes, you did.
Only
Yeah, you guys started, yeah.
actually resulted in independence. Anyways, I think that these were three really interesting papers, different topics, but connected really well. So if we can thank our panelists.